From the Journal of Everett Morgan, found waterlogged in a tackle box washed ashore 3 miles from Walker's Point. April 26, 2025. The marsh doesn't reveal its secrets easily. That's what my grandfather taught me when he first took me out on his boat 30 years ago. The water keeps what it wants, Ev, he'd say, calloused hands steady on the tiller. And sometimes it gives back things nobody asked for. I've been fishing these waters my whole life. The labyrinthine channels through the salt marsh, the hidden pools where striped bass shelter during high tide, the dangerous shallows where oyster beds can tear through a hull. They're as familiar to me as the lines on my palm. Or they were, until this morning. It was unusually cold for late April, the kind that seeps into your bones despite layers of wool and waxed cotton. I'd set out before dawn, as I always do, navigating by memory through the channel markers. The tide was coming in, bringing with it a dense fog that reduced visibility to maybe 15 feet in any direction. Nothing unusual for these parts, though something about the quality of the mist felt different. Thicker, almost like it had substance you could touch. I cut the motor near my usual spot, where the creek widens before it joins the bay. The silence was absolute in a way I'd never experienced before. No distant drone of highway traffic from inland, no calls of marsh birds, not even the gentle lapping of water against the hull. Just perfect stillness, as if the world outside the small circle of fog-limited visibility had simply ceased to exist. That's when I heard it. Not with my ears, exactly. It was more like the way you feel the bass from a distant speaker through your chest, a vibration rather than a sound. But it formed patterns, rhythms, something like words, though in no language I've ever heard. It seemed to emanate from everywhere at once, from the fog itself, from the water beneath me, maybe even from inside my own head. I nearly capsized the boat, scrambling for the radio. The static that greeted me was oddly comforting after that terrible not-quite silence. I adjusted the dial until I caught the Coast Guard frequency. Advise all vessels to exercise caution in the northern inlet due to an unspecified navigational hazard. Repeat, navigational hazard in the northern inlet. Nature of hazard undetermined. Updates will follow as information becomes available. The message repeated twice more before returning to the regular broadcast schedule. A navigational hazard. That could mean anything from a sunken vessel to floating debris. But something in the clinical precision of the warning raised the hairs on the back of my neck. I've heard plenty of Coast Guard alerts over the years. They're usually specific, coordinates, nature of the hazard, estimated duration. This vagueness wasn't standard procedure. I decided to cast my nets anyway. The family business doesn't pay for itself, and strange fog or not, I had quotas to meet. The wait when I pulled them up 2 hours later was promising, heavier than usual. But what came over the side wasn't my normal catch. The fish were wrong. Not dramatically so at first glance. Everything seemed the right size, the right general shape. It was only when I began sorting them that I noticed the abnormalities. Striped bass with too many fins, flounder with eyes on the wrong side, and patterns on their scales that shifted when I wasn't looking directly at them, forming and reforming into shapes that resembled the ancient petroglyphs found in the caves upriver. Most disturbing was a large specimen I initially took for a monkfish, all mouth and teeth with a flattened body. But monkfish don't have what appeared to be rudimentary fingers at the ends of their pectoral fins. And they certainly don't have iris-like structures that seem to dilate when exposed to sunlight. When I pressed my filleting knife against its belly, the skin parted to reveal not the white flesh I expected, but a gelatinous, iridescent material that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. I dropped the knife. The not monkfish twitched once, then was still. I should have thrown everything back. Should have radioed in my own report of something inexplicable in these waters I've known all my life. Instead, I found myself mechanically cleaning the normal-looking specimens, wrapping them in plastic, and storing them in the ice chest. The others, the wrong ones, I returned to the water one by one. They disappeared beneath the surface without a splash, as if the marsh had eagerly reclaimed them. All except for the not monkfish. That one I wrapped separately and stowed beneath the seat. Even I don't understand why. The fog began to lift as I turned back toward the harbor. Familiar landmarks emerged from the mist. The abandoned lighthouse on Settlers Point, the rusted hull of the shrimp trawler that ran aground during last year's hurricane, the weathered docks where generations of fishing boats have unloaded their catches. Everything was exactly as it should be, and yet nothing felt right. Liam Thorne from the Coast Guard was at the harbor when I docked. Not unusual to see him there, checking permits and inspecting catches, but he seemed on edge, his normally relaxed posture rigid, eyes scanning the returning boats with unusual intensity. "Anything unusual out there today, Morgan?" he asked, trying and failing to sound casual. I thought of the vibrations that weren't quite sounds, the fish that weren't quite fish, the package hidden under my seat. "Nothing to report," I heard myself say. "Decent catch. Standard fare." He nodded, but his eyes lingered on my boat a moment too long before he moved on to the next returning vessel. When I got home, I discovered my hands trembling so badly I could barely unlock the door. Inside, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wall calendar still displaying my late wife's neat handwriting. 5 years gone now, but I keep it there. Some form of penance, maybe. I found myself sketching on a napkin, intricate, spiraling patterns that echoed the shifting designs I'd seen on those wrong fish. I didn't consciously remember them in such detail, but my hand seemed to know what to draw. When I finished and looked at what I'd created, a wave of nausea hit me so hard I nearly fell from my chair. It was a map, not of any coastline I recognized, but unquestionably a map, with depth markings and currents indicated by arrows. And at its center, in a region marked by concentric circles, a single phrase written in my own handwriting, but in words I didn't remember writing. "They are returning. I'll go out again tomorrow." I tell myself it's because I need the income, because it's what I've always done. But something deeper pulls me back toward the marsh, toward the fog, toward that vibration that might be a voice calling my name. God help me. I think I want to answer. Journal entry found in Everett Morgan's fishing cabin, pages water-stained and partially illegible. April 28, 2025. I didn't write yesterday. After returning from the water, I found myself unable to focus long enough to hold a pen. The vibration stayed with me, reverberating through my skull even as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep, when it finally came, offered no respite, only fragments of dreams featuring vast underwater structures that seemed to breathe and pulse with life. The knot monkfish is gone. I'd stored it in my deep freezer, wrapped in 3 layers of plastic. This morning, all that remained was a puddle of iridescent fluid that evaporated when exposed to air, leaving behind intricate frost patterns on the freezer floor. The patterns matched sections of the map I'd unconsciously drawn. I returned to the water today. The rational part of me insisted it was merely to make up for yesterday's lost workday. But I knew different. Something was pulling me back, a compulsion as powerful and instinctive as thirst. The fog had retreated, but the sky hung low and heavy with storm clouds that never quite delivered their promised rain. The air felt charged, like the moments before lightning strikes. My skin prickled with static electricity as I guided my boat through the marsh channels. I met Liam Thorne's Coast Guard vessel near the outer markers. He slowed as he approached, cutting his engine to idle. "Morning, Morgan." His voice was tight, professional. Nothing like his usual easy manner. "Heading to your usual grounds?" I nodded, noticing the dark circles under his eyes, the tension in his jaw. "You look like hell, Thorne," I said, attempting normalcy. "Radio interference kept us up all night." He glanced back at his communications officer, who was adjusting settings on their equipment. "Getting some unusual patterns. Started in your area 2 days ago, now it's spreading down the coast." "What kind of patterns?" "That's the thing, they're not random static. There's structure to it. Almost like..." He trailed off, then shook his head. "Listen, Morgan, between us, I'd stay clear of the northern inlet. Something's not right out there." "The navigational hazard?" His eyes met mine, searching. "You could call it that." Before I could press further, his radio crackled. The young communications officer called him over with urgency. Liam gave me a curt nod before returning to his duties, but not before saying, "Watch yourself out there, Everett. And if you see anything unusual, anything at all, report it immediately." I continued toward my fishing grounds, but found myself drawn further north than usual, toward the area Liam had explicitly warned me to avoid. The vibrations returned as I neared, stronger this time, with distinct patterns that my mind almost recognized as language. The catch was abundant again, unnervingly so. Fish practically leapt into my nets, as if eager to be caught. Most appeared normal at first glance, but closer inspection revealed subtle wrongness. Gill slits that pulsed with bioluminescence, eye structures with rectangular pupils, fin arrangements that seemed mathematically precise rather than naturally evolved. Around noon, I noticed something floating on the water's surface about 50 yards out. A clump of seaweed, perhaps, or debris from another fishing vessel. But when I drew closer, I realized it was a fragment of netting, not modern synthetic mesh, but something woven from a material I couldn't identify. The fibers were dark green, almost black, with an oily sheen that caught the light strangely. The pattern was complex, with knots forming symbols similar to those I'd sketched in my unwitting map. I reached to retrieve it with my gaff hook. The moment metal touched the strange netting, the vibrations intensified dramatically. Not painful, exactly, but overwhelming, like standing too close to massive church bells as they ring. The netting seemed to react, coiling around the hook with deliberate movement before I could pull it aboard. As I watched, transfixed, the water around my boat began to stir. Not from wind or current, but from below, as if something vast was shifting beneath the surface. The motion created circular ripples that expanded outward in perfect concentric rings. Mathematics, not nature. My depth finder began registering impossible readings, alternating between extreme depths and no bottom at all, despite the fact that I knew this area to be no more than 20 feet deep at high tide. The screen flickered between normal display and strange angular symbols that resembled the patterns on the fish scales. Then, just for an instant, the water cleared, became transparent as glass despite its natural murky state. Below my boat, extending into depths that shouldn't exist, I glimpsed a structure. Not a shipwreck or natural formation, but something built with precision and purpose. Massive stone blocks arranged in geometries that hurt my eyes to follow, covered with the same symbols from my unconscious drawing. And moving among the structures, shapes, fluid and massive and wrong in ways my mind couldn't properly process. The vision lasted only seconds before the water returned to its normal opacity, but it was enough. I dropped the gaff hook, watching as the strange netting unwound itself and slipped beneath the surface, descending far deeper than should have been possible. I returned to harbor earlier than usual, my holds half empty. Marie Coulter was there, setting up equipment on the public dock. She's new to the area, a marine biologist from the university studying ecological changes in the marsh. Most fishermen give her a wide berth, wary of scientists whose findings might lead to new restrictions, but today I found myself approaching her. "Finding anything interesting?" I asked, nodding toward her collection jars and sampling equipment. She looked up, pushing her glasses higher on her nose. "Mr. Morgan, right?" "Actually, yes. I'm observing some highly unusual microbial activity in these waters. Organisms that don't match any known taxonomy." She hesitated, studying my face. "I heard you've been fishing these marshes for decades. Have you noticed anything different lately? Changes in marine behavior, water conditions?" I should have told her everything, about the vibrations, the wrong fish, the impossible vision beneath my boat. Instead, I shrugged. Waters are always changing. Nature does what it wants. "Yes, but these changes are." She trailed off, then lowered her voice. "These changes aren't natural, Mr. Morgan. The biological structures I'm seeing, they're engineered, not evolved. And they're spreading." Before I could respond, Sheriff Hayes approached, his weathered face set in familiar lines of irritation. "Ms. Coulter, we've talked about this. You're alarming the locals with this talk." "It's not talk, Sheriff. It's empirical data." She gestured to her microscope. "See for yourself." Hayes ignored the offer. "Mr. Morgan, 2 boats didn't return last night. The Henderson's trawler and Old Pete's skiff. You see anything of them out there?" I shook my head, a cold weight settling in my stomach. Both were experienced watermen who knew these marshes as well as I did. "They were last seen heading toward the northern inlet," Hayes added, watching my reaction carefully. "Where you've been fishing lately?" "I saw nothing," I said, the lie bitter on my tongue. Later, as I unloaded my diminished catch, I found another oddity, a small, spiral-shaped object nestled among the fish. Not a shell or any recognizable marine life, but something that appeared carved from greenish-black stone, similar in color to the strange netting. The spiral contained precisely 13 turns, and tiny symbols were etched along its length. When I touched it, the vibrations returned, and with them came knowledge, not in words, but in certainties that bloomed in my mind fully formed. They have always been here. They were here before us. They will remain when we are gone. And they are waking now, rising from the depths where they have dreamed for millennia. The spiral sits beside me as I write this. Sometimes, from the corner of my eye, I think I see it move, turning slowly counterclockwise like water circling a drain. Tomorrow, I will go out again. I must. They are calling. And somehow, I think they're calling specifically for me. Journal pages found in a waterproof document case, recovered from the Morgan family attic. May 1st, 2025. 3 days have passed since my last entry. I've been on the water each day, drawn to the northern inlet despite the growing dread that accompanies each visit. The Coast Guard has upgraded their alert. The radio now advises all vessels to avoid the area entirely rather than simply exercise caution. They cite unpredictable tidal anomalies and submerged obstacles as the official reason. I know better. There's something deliberate in what's happening out there, something with purpose. Last night, I couldn't sleep. The vibrations have become a constant presence, like tinnitus, but felt through bone rather than heard. They've taken on a cadence that reminds me of the sea chantas my grandfather used to sing, rhythmic, designed to synchronize movement. I found myself pacing the house at 3 in the morning, rubbing the spiral stone between my fingers like worry beads. That's when I remembered the trunk. Every Morgan who's ever fished these waters has kept records, journals, logs, observations of tides and weather and fishing grounds. My grandfather was particularly meticulous. I'd stored his old leather-bound journals in the attic when I inherited the house, too focused on my grief to look through them. The trunk was exactly where I remembered, beneath the eaves behind boxes of my late wife's belongings. The leather journals inside, 13 of them, I now realize, were arranged chronologically from 1947 to 1986, the year before his death. I took them downstairs and began reading by lamplight as dawn broke over the marsh. What I found chills me still. In March of 1967, my grandfather described an encounter with what he called the fog that sings. For 3 weeks, he documented the same phenomena I'm experiencing now: strange vibrations, peculiar catches, a compulsion to return to the water despite growing unease. He drew the same symbols I've been seeing, described the same spiral stone. Then the entries stop. When they resume in June of that year, he makes no mention of the events. His handwriting is different, shakier, less certain. The detailed observations that characterized his earlier entries are replaced by functional, almost clinical notes about weather and catch quantities. It's as if something fundamental in him had changed. But that's not the most disturbing part. In the margins of several subsequent entries, written in a cramped, almost microscopic hand different from his normal script, are fragments that seem to be in a language I don't recognize but somehow understand. They rise not to conquer but to reclaim. The waters remember what the land forgets. When the stars align, the depths will answer. The final journal contains a folded map, yellowed, water-stained, but unmistakably showing the northern inlet. Marked in red ink are 7 locations arranged in a pattern identical to the constellation Pleiades. Next to this map is a newspaper clipping about local fisherman Tobias Marsh, who disappeared without trace in 1967, his boat found drifting empty in the northern inlet. I've been comparing my grandfather's journals with my own experiences, looking for patterns. The timing is too precise to be coincidence, almost exactly 58 years apart. A cycle of some kind, perhaps tied to astronomical events? I'm no astronomer, but I remember Marie Coulter mentioning something about a rare planetary alignment during one of her educational talks at the harbor. Speaking of Marie, I encountered her again today. She was collecting water samples near the channel markers, her small research vessel loaded with more sophisticated equipment than before. She waved me over, her expression both excited and troubled. "Mr. Morgan, I was hoping to see you. I've been analyzing those microbial samples and," she lowered her voice, though we were alone on the water, "they're changing. Not evolving, changing. Restructuring their DNA in real time in response to some external stimulus." She showed me her tablet, displaying microscopic images of organisms that seemed to be rebuilding themselves, forming intricate geometric patterns. "And that's not all," she continued. "I've been picking up energy readings from the northern inlet, low-frequency waves that don't match any known natural phenomena. They almost look like communication," I finished for her. Our eyes met, and I saw the same understanding in hers that I've been fighting against acknowledging in myself. "You've sensed it too," she said. Not a question. I found myself showing her the spiral stone. Her scientific curiosity momentarily overcame her caution as she reached for it, turning it over in her hands. "This is incredible," she whispered. "The material isn't stone at all. It's some kind of biological composite." As she studied it, tiny flecks of bioluminescence activated beneath her fingertips. "It's responding to touch, almost like it's reading me." She looked up sharply. "Where exactly did you find this?" I told her about my catch in the northern inlet, about the vibrations, about the bizarre fish. I stopped short of mentioning my grandfather's journals or what I'd glimpsed beneath the surface, still unable to fully articulate those experiences. "I need to take this to my lab," she said, but I found myself reaching for the spiral, reclaiming it with an urgency that surprised us both. "Sorry," I muttered. I need to keep it with me." She studied my face with new concern. "Everett, how long have you been experiencing these vibrations?" Before I could answer, we were interrupted by the arrival of a Coast Guard vessel, Liam Thorne's patrol boat. He approached with unusual formality, full uniform rather than the casual attire he normally wore when checking fishing vessels. "Dr. Coulter, Mr. Morgan." His eyes lingered on the spiral stone in my hand before continuing. "I need to inform you that the northern inlet is now under federal jurisdiction. All civilian vessels are prohibited from entering the area effective immediately." "Federal jurisdiction?" Marie challenged. "On what grounds?" "Environmental hazard," Liam replied, but I could see he didn't believe his own words. "Orders came down this morning. We've got personnel from some agency I've never heard of setting up shop in the harbor master's office. Very official, very tight-lipped." He glanced over his shoulder, ensuring his crew wasn't within earshot. "Listen, both of you. Something weird is happening out here. 3 more boats missing since yesterday. Radar systems malfunctioning. And those vibrations." He stopped, seeing our expressions. "You feel them too, don't you?" Marie nodded slowly. "I've been measuring them. They're increasing in intensity and frequency. And they're structured, definitely not natural." Liam ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd never seen from him before. "My grandfather was Coast Guard too, stationed here in the 60s. He used to tell stories. I always thought they were just old man's tales to scare the kids, but now—" "What stories?" I asked, feeling a cold certainty about what he might say. "About the time the ocean started singing. About shapes in the deep that shouldn't exist. About people who went out to the northern inlet and came back changed." He looked directly at me. "About the Morgan who led them there." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. "I have to go," I said suddenly, starting my engine. The vibrations were intensifying, pulling me toward the northern inlet with an urgency I couldn't ignore. "Everett, wait," Marie called, but I was already moving away. As I neared the boundary of the newly restricted area, I saw them. Sleek black boats with no identifying markings, personnel in environmental suits taking readings. One looked up as I approached, raising what appeared to be a communication device. I turned back, the compulsion momentarily overridden by self-preservation. But the vibrations followed, traveling through the water, through my hull, through my bones. They felt almost disappointed. Tonight, I'll continue reading my grandfather's journals. There must be more, some explanation, some way to understand what's happening. And tomorrow, restricted area or not, I know I'll find a way back to the northern inlet. Because they're calling more urgently now. And the voice in the vibrations is starting to sound familiar. Like family. Journal entries written on waterproof paper, found sealed in a glass bottle washed ashore at Blackwater Point. May 3rd, 2025. The vibrations have become words. Not in any language that human vocal cords could produce, but words nonetheless. Syllables formed from the rhythmic pulses that travel through water, through air, through bone and tissue. At first, I could only catch fragments, like conversations overheard from another room. Now they're becoming clearer, more insistent. Return. Descend. Remember. I've spent the last 2 days scouring my grandfather's journals, looking for anything that might explain what's happening. The entries from 1967 grow increasingly frantic before that sudden, months-long gap. One passage particularly haunts me. The dreams are most vivid at high tide. I see the city beneath the waves, not sunken, but built underwater by beings who never needed air. The architecture follows rules of geometry that shouldn't work, creating spaces that somehow contain more volume inside than their external dimensions would allow. And they're waiting there, patient as the tides themselves, for the stars to align once more. The stars. I remembered Marie mentioning an astronomical alignment, so I called her this morning. She answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting for my call. "I was about to contact you," she said, her voice tight with excitement or fear, perhaps both. "I've been analyzing the frequency patterns of those vibrations, comparing them to astronomical data. Everett, they match the orbital resonance of Neptune and Pluto, a pattern that only occurs once every 58 years. 58 years. The exact time since my grandfather's encounter. There's more," she continued. "I managed to get a sample of sediment from the northern inlet before the feds locked it down. The chemical composition is changing, reconfiguring at the molecular level. It's like the seabed itself is being transformed. Into what? I don't know yet, but whatever it is, it's not natural to Earth. I told her about my grandfather's journals, about the gap in his entries, about the strange notes in the margins. She listened without interruption, her scientific skepticism seemingly suspended. "Can I see them?" she finally asked. "The journals?" We arranged to meet at my house later that day. In the meantime, I had somewhere else to be. Sheriff Hayes found me at my usual spot on the docks, mending nets I had no intention of using. His cruiser had barely stopped before he was striding toward me, face lined with exhaustion and worry. "Morgan," he said without preamble, "I need to talk to you about the northern inlet." I kept my eyes on my work. "It's restricted now. Nothing to talk about." "Cut the crap." He lowered his voice. 5 boats missing in a week. Whatever's happening out there, it started right after you came back with that weird catch you're not telling anyone about. I looked up then. "How do you know about that?" "Small town. People talk." He rubbed his jaw, the stubble making a scratching sound that momentarily drowned out the ever-present vibrations. "Listen, I've got families asking questions I can't answer. Feds giving me the runaround. And now there's talk about evacuating the coastal areas." "Evacuating? Why?" "They're calling it a precautionary measure due to tidal anomalies." "Whatever the hell that means." He studied my face. "You know something, Morgan? I can see it in your eyes." Perhaps it was the lack of sleep or the weight of what I'd been carrying alone, but I found myself telling Hayes about the vibrations, about the strange catch, about what I'd glimpsed beneath the surface. I stopped short of mentioning my grandfather's journals or the growing sense that I was somehow meant to be part of whatever was happening. Hayes listened, his expression shifting from skepticism to grim acceptance. "I wouldn't believe any of this," he said when I finished, "except I've been having dreams. The same dream, every night this week. I'm underwater, but I can breathe fine. There's this city made of stone and coral, but it's alive somehow. And there's a voice." He trailed off, looking embarrassed. "What does it say?" I asked, knowing the answer before he spoke. "Return. Descend. Remember." He shook his head. "What the hell does that mean, Morgan?" Before I could respond, a commotion erupted at the far end of the dock. One of the black unmarked boats that had been patrolling the restricted area was returning to harbor. Even from a distance, I could see something was wrong. The vessel was listing heavily to one side, and figures in hazmat suits were clustered at the bow. Hayes and I joined the growing crowd of onlookers. The boat limped into its slip, and medical personnel rushed aboard. Moments later, they emerged carrying a stretcher. The man on it was convulsing violently, his hazmat suit partially torn away to reveal skin covered in what looked like iridescent scales forming geometric patterns. "Everyone back!" shouted a woman in a dark suit, flashing government credentials. "This is a quarantine situation." The crowd reluctantly dispersed, but not before I caught a glimpse of the afflicted man's face. His eyes were open, but the pupils had changed shape, no longer round but diamond-like with a vertical slit. And he was smiling. Marie arrived at my house just after sunset, carrying equipment I didn't recognize. Her eyes widened when I showed her the journals. "These are incredible," she murmured, scanning the pages with a handheld device. "The ink in these margin notes, it's not ink at all. It's composed of organic compounds that don't match any known biological material." She placed the spiral stone I'd found next to the journals. "Same composition. They're connected." She looked up at me. "Everett, I think your grandfather was being used as a conduit, just like you are now." "A conduit for what?" "For them. Whatever they are." She hesitated. "I have a theory, but it sounds crazy." "Try me." Crazy seems to be the baseline these days. "What if they're not invaders?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "What if they were here first? What if humans are the invasive species, and they're just reclaiming?" The vibrations surged in that moment, as if in affirmation. I found myself nodding, though I hadn't intended to. "You feel it too, don't you?" I asked. "The pull toward the water?" She nodded slowly. "Since I started studying those samples, it's like they're in my head now, rearranging my thoughts." She pushed up her sleeve, revealing a patch of skin on her forearm where tiny, almost imperceptible scales had begun to form. "And it's not just mental." The implications terrified me, but there was something else beneath the fear, a sense of recognition of rightness. The tidal patterns that had governed my life as a fisherman suddenly seemed like a language I was on the verge of understanding. Night had fallen completely when we heard the vehicles, multiple engines, heavy tires on gravel. Headlights swept across the windows. They found me, Marie whispered. I took restricted samples, used university equipment without authorization. I led her to the back door, but more lights appeared in the yard. We were surrounded. Mr. Morgan? A voice called through a megaphone. This is Lieutenant Commander Davis with the U.S. Navy Special Containment Division. We need you and Dr. Coulter to come with us. They know my name, Marie said, her voice trembling. How do they know I'm here? The vibrations intensified, forming new words in my mind. Protect, conceal, preserve. Without conscious thought, I moved to a floorboard in the corner of my kitchen, one I'd never paid attention to before. It came loose easily, revealing a small compartment containing an object wrapped in oilcloth. I unwrapped it to find a carved stone disc, twin to the spiral I'd found but larger, covered in the same symbols. What is that? Marie asked. I don't know, I said, though that wasn't entirely true. Some part of me recognized it, just as some part of me had known exactly where it was hidden. But I think it might help us. The pounding on the door began just as the disc started to glow with a faint, pulsing bioluminescence that matched the rhythm of the vibrations. The patterns on its surface seemed to shift and rearrange themselves, forming a map, not of land and sea, but of the spaces in between. And I suddenly knew exactly where we needed to go. Pages recovered from a plastic document case, found embedded in marsh mud after the coastal anomalies. May 5th, 2025. We escaped. That still seems impossible, yet here we are, hiding in an abandoned fishing shack on Widow's Point, a forgotten spit of land extending into the marsh where few venture due to treacherous shallows. The authorities have likely discovered my boat by now, but they'll be searching the waterways, not this dilapidated structure slowly sinking into the mud. I should start from the beginning. The carved disc Marie and I found beneath my floorboard saved us. As the authorities broke through my front door, the disc's bioluminescence intensified, pulsing in a pattern that matched the vibrations resonating through us. The agents that entered, hazmat suits, heavy weapons, froze in place when the light washed over them. Not unconscious, but temporarily locked in some form of stasis, their expressions visible through their face shields, confusion giving way to vacant acceptance. We slipped past them into the night, the disc growing warmer in my hands, pulling us toward the marsh. My boat was where I'd left it, and we cast off just as vehicle engines roared back to life behind us. The disc guided our path through the labyrinthine channels I've navigated all my life yet suddenly seemed new, revealing passages I'd never noticed before. We arrived at Widow's Point near dawn. The shack was exactly as the vibrations had shown me, weathered gray boards, partially collapsed roof, forgotten by all but the marsh birds that nest in its eaves. Inside, we found evidence that someone had used it recently, a battery-powered lantern, bottles of water, provisions, and carved into the wall, the same symbols from my grandfather's journals. Someone knew we'd come here, Marie whispered, tracing the symbols with her fingertips. The transformation that had begun on her arm has spread. Delicate scales now trace patterns across her collarbones, visible at the neck of her shirt. She doesn't try to hide them anymore. Neither do I hide the webbing that has begun to form between my fingers, subtle but unmistakable. We spent the day in exhausted sleep, taking turns keeping watch. The vibrations continued, but muted, as if allowing us respite. As sunset approached, we ventured outside. Widow's Point offers a clear view of the northern inlet, and what we saw there defied comprehension. The water had changed color, not the natural brown-green of the marsh, but a deep, luminous blue that shouldn't exist in these waters. The surface was perfectly still despite the evening breeze, reflecting the darkening sky like polished obsidian. And at regular intervals across that unnatural stillness, circular patterns appeared, massive rings expanding outward, as if giant raindrops were falling from below rather than above. It's happening, Marie whispered, her scientific detachment giving way to awe. The molecular restructuring I observed in my samples, it's happening on a massive scale. As darkness fell completely, we witnessed the first emergence. A structure broke the water's surface in the center of the inlet, not rising with splash and chaos, but sliding up with deliberate precision, water sheeting off its surfaces like mercury. A stone spire, covered in glowing symbols identical to those on our artifacts. More followed, spires, archways, walls, assembling themselves with mathematical perfection into structures that defied conventional architecture. They created spaces that seemed to bend inward, containing more than their outer dimensions should allow, just as my grandfather had described. My God, Marie breathed. They're not building new structures, they're uncovering what was already there. Like they're peeling back reality itself. The vibrations intensified with each new emergence, no longer merely sounds or sensations, but full concepts downloaded directly into our consciousness. Homecoming, restoration, convergence. Throughout the night, we watched the city reveal itself, because that's what it clearly was, a city built for beings with no interest in or knowledge of human limitations. Its geometry followed rules that made my eyes water when I tried to trace the connections between structures. Some buildings seemed to exist in multiple locations simultaneously, while others appeared to fold in on themselves infinitely. At dawn, boats appeared on the horizon, Coast Guard vessels and the unmarked black ships of the government agency. They established a perimeter at what they must have deemed a safe distance from the phenomena, but I knew better. Distance meant nothing now. The boundaries between here and there, now and then them and us, all were dissolving. Around midday, Sheriff Hayes arrived in his private boat. I spotted him through my binoculars, motoring directly toward our hiding place with unerring accuracy. The vibrations surged, telling me trustworthy, necessary, receiver. He's one of us, I told Marie. He's been chosen too. Hayes was transformed more dramatically than either of us. His skin bore elaborate patterns of scales arranged in symbols, and his eyes had begun the vertical pupil transformation I'd seen in the government agent. Yet he moved with purpose, his expression clear and determined. "They sent me to find you," he said without preamble as he stepped onto our rickety dock. No clarification of who they were was necessary. "You understand what's happening?" Marie asked. "Not entirely, but I know we're part of it." He handed me a waterproof tube. "I found this in the station archives. It's been there since 1967, with instructions to deliver it to Everett Morgan on this exact date." Inside was a map, far older than the one in my grandfather's journal, but showing the same constellation pattern marked across the inlet. Additional markings indicated 7 points on land surrounding the water, ritual sites I somehow knew, though that knowledge didn't come from any conscious learning. "We need to go to these places," I said, understanding flooding through me. "We need to complete what was started 58 years ago." "What exactly was started?" Marie asked, scientific curiosity still battling with the transformation overtaking her rational mind. Hayes and I exchanged glances, both of us receiving the same information through the vibrations. "A realignment," Hayes said. "A correction. They were here first," I added. "Long before humans. This inlet, this whole coastline, it's built on top of their city. When the stars align, the boundaries between their reality and ours thin. They can return." "Return how?" Marie pressed. "By replacing us?" The answer came to all of us simultaneously. Not replacement. Incorporation. Evolution. A distant rumble drew our attention back to the inlet. A new structure was emerging, larger than any before, a vast dome of material that resembled mother of pearl but darker, shot through with veins of bioluminescence. As it rose, the water around it began to churn. Through my binoculars, I watched the government boats scramble, their ordered perimeter collapsing as they fled the disturbance. All except one, a Coast Guard vessel I recognized as Liam Thorne's. It held position even as the waters churned around it. "Liam," I whispered, a pang of concern for my friend cutting through the otherworldly calm that had settled over me. The vibrations responded. "He serves another purpose." Witness. Recorder. Warning. As if summoned by my attention, Liam's voice crackled over the emergency radio frequency. "This is Lieutenant Thorne, Coast Guard Vessel Delta 9. I'm observing what appears to be a structure emerging from the inlet waters. Multiple structures now visible. This is unlike any natural phenomenon. Requesting immediate scientific personnel," and static cut off his transmission. When his voice returned, it was different, still recognizably Liam, but altered, as if multiple voices spoke in perfect unison with his. "The stars have aligned. The cycle returns. What was submerged shall rise. What was forgotten shall be remembered." The transmission ended. Through the binoculars, I watched as Liam's boat began to move, not fleeing like the others, but navigating with purpose toward the newly risen dome. "We need to go," Hayes said, pointing to the map. "These sites, they need to be activated before moonrise." As Marie and I gathered our few possessions, I noticed the carved disc and spiral stone had changed. Their patterns were moving, flowing like liquid, reconfiguring into new forms that matched the structures rising from the inlet. The vibrations now formed a continuous stream of information, revealing our purpose with absolute clarity. We aren't victims of this transformation. We're catalysts, chosen vessels for entities that existed before humanity took its first steps, now returning as the cosmic alignment permits their reemergence. And that terrifies me, not because I fear what's happening, but because I welcome it. With each passing hour, I feel less human and more connected. To the water, to the ancient city, to whatever vast consciousness is orchestrating this reawakening. As we prepare to leave for the first ritual site, I write these words as a record, perhaps my last as Everett Morgan fisherman. By the next moonrise, I may be something else entirely. And the most frightening part? I can hardly wait. Pages recovered from a waterproof document case found floating near Widow's Point. May 6, 2025. The storm came with impossible suddenness. One moment, the evening sky was clear above our heads as Hayes, Marie, and I completed the fourth ritual site, a forgotten well behind the abandoned Hargrove property, where we placed the spiral stone in a precise position indicated by the map. The next moment, clouds materialized as if birthed from nothing, churning directly above us in a perfect spiral formation that mirrored the stone's pattern. I've weathered many coastal storms in my life, but this was something else entirely. The clouds didn't grow or gather. They simply appeared, fully formed and rotating with mathematical precision. The pressure dropped so rapidly my ears popped painfully. Birds erupted from the marsh in panicked clouds, their cries drowned by a deep subsonic rumble that seemed to emanate from the earth itself. "We need to hurry," Hayes said, his transformed eyes reflecting the unnatural lightning flickering within the clouds. 3 more sights before moonrise. Marie checked her watch, a strangely mundane gesture, given our circumstances. 2 hours, she said. Her voice had changed since yesterday, developing harmonic undertones that reminded me of the chanting I'd first heard in the fog weeks ago. We barely made it back to the boat before the rain began, thick, viscous droplets that struck the ground with such force they left small craters in the mud. On my skin, they didn't feel like water but something slicker, almost oily. When I wiped a drop from my cheek, it left a smear of bioluminescence that faded slowly, like a reluctant memory. As Hayes navigated us through the increasingly turbulent channels, emergency alerts blared from my weather radio. The Coast Guard was issuing warnings about severe weather conditions, advising all watercraft to seek immediate shelter. But beneath the standard language, I detected something else, a subtly altered cadence in the announcer's voice, words emphasized in patterns that conveyed a secondary message to those attuned to the vibrations. Residents are advised to remain in their homes. Water levels may rise substantially. This is not a drill. Prepare for extended isolation. Remain. May. Substantially. Not. Prepare. Isolation. When arranged in that order, the emphasized words formed no coherent sentence, yet they resonated with meaning through the vibrations. The boundary thins. Witnesses required. Documentation essential. They're spreading the warning to those who can hear it, Marie observed, her fingers tracing the now iridescent scales along her arm. Those who've been chosen will understand. The 5th site was a small island barely larger than a sandbar, where a single twisted oak stood against the elements. According to the map, something should have been buried at its base. Hayes and I dug frantically in the storm-lashed mud, while Marie held the carved disc, which now pulsed with intense light synchronized perfectly with the lightning overhead. 6 inches down, my fingers struck something solid. I pulled it free, a small figurine carved from some dense, black material. It depicted a being vaguely humanoid in overall shape, but with too many limbs arranged in anatomically impossible configurations. Its surface was covered in minute carvings, spiraling patterns that seemed to shift when not viewed directly. The moment it emerged from the earth, the storm intensified. Lightning struck the water around our small island in a precise ring, transforming the marsh into a cauldron of steam and light. Through that illumination, I saw something that froze my blood and ignited my transformed mind simultaneously. Shapes in the water. Massive, sinuous forms moving beneath the surface, their dimensions impossible to comprehend fully. They weren't swimming so much as flowing through reality itself, bending the water around them in ways that violated physics. And they were converging on the inlet where the underwater city continued its emergence. "Look," Marie gasped, pointing toward the mainland. Through the storm's chaos, we could see the lights of emergency vehicles along the coastal road, their flashing beacons insignificant against nature's fury. A Coast Guard helicopter struggled against the unnatural winds, its searchlight sweeping the turbulent waters. As we watched, it suddenly veered sideways, caught in an invisible current. For one terrible moment, it hung suspended, rotors straining but gaining no purchase in air that no longer obeyed terrestrial rules. Then it fell, not like a stone but like a leaf caught in competing breezes, drifting in an eerily gentle descent until it disappeared beneath the waves. "They shouldn't be here," Hayes said, voice tight with concern. "The boundary, it's not just thinning, it's rupturing ahead of schedule." "What does that mean?" I asked, though the vibrations were already supplying the answer, flooding my consciousness with images of catastrophic convergence. Our reality and theirs colliding without the proper preparations, like improperly mixed chemicals triggering a violent reaction. "It means we need to complete the circuit now," Marie said. "All 7 sites activated before the reaction becomes uncontrollable." We fought our way back to the boat, just as an emergency alert blared through the rain. "This is an emergency broadcast. Coastal evacuation orders are now in effect for all residents within 3 miles of shoreline. Unknown phenomena causing rapid water level increase and structural instability. This is not a test." The radio crackled with static, then a different voice emerged, Lieutenant Thorne's, but altered even further from yesterday's transmission. "The veil parts. What sleeps will wake. What rises brings truth. Those who see will become. Those who deny will dissolve." His transmission cut off with a sound like tearing fabric. The boat's engine sputtered in the increasingly dense water, which had begun to exhibit properties more akin to gel than liquid. Hayes cursed, pushing the throttle higher as we navigated toward the 6th site, an abandoned lighthouse on a rocky outcropping that once marked the main channel before the marsh claimed it decades ago. As we approached, I saw figures moving on the lighthouse platform, human silhouettes backlit by emergency flares. Military or government agents had beaten us there. "They're trying to stop it," Hayes said grimly. "They don't understand they're only making it worse." He cut the engine, letting our momentum carry us into the shadow of a partially submerged oak. From our hidden position, we watched 4 figures in specialized gear methodically planting what appeared to be explosive charges around the lighthouse's base. "If they destroy that site, the circuit will be broken," Marie whispered. "The alignment disrupted." "What happens then?" I asked. Hayes's transformed eyes reflected lightning as he turned to me. "Instead of controlled convergence, we get..." A sudden roar interrupted him as something breached the water's surface about 50 yards from the lighthouse. At first, I thought it was another emerging structure from the ancient city, but this moved with organic purpose. A vast shape rose into the storm, a living entity with proportions that seemed to shift as my mind tried to comprehend it, its skin a mosaic of bioluminescent patterns matching those appearing on our own transforming bodies. The government agents froze, then scrambled for weapons. Gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes insignificant against the storm and the creature's immensity. It responded not with aggression but with presence, expanding its consciousness outward in waves that distorted reality around it. I watched in horror and fascination as the agents' forms began to warp, their bodies stretching and compressing as if reality itself had become elastic. Their screams cut off suddenly as they simply unfolded, their physical forms rearranging into patterns that matched the symbols carved into our artifacts. Where 4 humans had stood moments before, only swirling mists remained, circling the lighthouse in perfect orbits. "My God," Marie whispered. They were repatterned. The creature submerged as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving only circular ripples that defied the storm's chaos, maintaining perfect geometric precision. We waited, breath held, for some sign that it was safe to proceed. After several minutes, Hayes nudged our boat forward. As we approached the lighthouse, I noticed that the stone itself had changed, veins of luminous material now threaded through its structure, pulsing in time with the vibrations resonating through our bodies. Inside, we found the chamber marked on our map. In its center stood a small stone altar, weathered by time but unmistakably designed for our purpose. I placed the figurine we'd recovered upon it, aligning it precisely according to the vibrations guiding me. The response was immediate. The lighthouse lens above us, dark for decades, suddenly blazed to life. Not with electrical light, but with the same bioluminescence that marked our artifacts and our changing bodies. Its beam cut through the storm with impossible intensity, reaching toward the final ritual site on the opposite shore. As we descended to return to our boat, a Coast Guard emergency broadcast echoed through the darkness. "All personnel withdraw from 3-mile coastal zone immediately. Repeat, all personnel withdraw. Structural anomalies spreading inland. Multiple vessels lost." Maintain radio silence except for emergency communications. Hayes's radio crackled to life unsummoned, and Sheriff Walter Hayes's official voice responded. This is Sheriff Hayes. I'm observing the phenomenon from the old lighthouse. The structures in the water appear to be expanding. Requesting scientific personnel to. He clicked off the transmission with a grim smile. That should keep them focused here while we activate the final site. The storm reached impossible intensity as we crossed the inlet. Water and sky became indistinguishable, reality itself seeming to liquefy around us. Twice, massive shapes passed beneath our boat, lifting us momentarily before continuing toward the emerging city at the inlet center. The final site was the most ordinary, a small family cemetery on a hill overlooking the water, forgotten by all but the most dedicated local historians. According to the map, we needed to place the carved disc against a specific headstone marked with a barely visible spiral. As we climbed the muddy hillside, the clouds directly above broke open, not clearing, but forming a perfect circular void through which stars were visible. Not the stars I knew, but a different configuration, as if we were seeing the sky from another world entirely. From this elevated position, we could see the full extent of what was happening across the inlet. The ancient city had risen further, its impossible architecture now fully revealed. Buildings that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, structures that folded inward eternally, spires that seemed to pierce the very fabric of reality. And moving among them, massive entities whose forms shifted constantly, like living equations recalculating themselves with each passing moment. The water around the city no longer behaved like water at all. It flowed upward in perfect spirals, forming liquid archways and bridges between structures. Along the shoreline, reality itself seemed to be dissolving, trees, rocks, and abandoned buildings losing solid form, becoming fluid patterns that matched the symbols in my grandfather's journal. We're witnessing the beginning, Marie said, her voice now fully harmonic, resonating with the vibrations pulsing through the air. Not an invasion, not destruction, metamorphosis. As we reached the cemetery gates, I noticed something moving among the gravestones, a human figure, stumbling forward despite obvious injury. As lightning illuminated the scene, I recognized Lieutenant Thorne. His transformation was far advanced, his skin entirely covered in shifting patterns, his eyes no longer human but crystalline structures that reflected light in impossible ways. When he spoke, his mouth didn't move, rather, the vibrations emanated directly from him. Morgan, I tried to warn them. They wouldn't listen. The boundaries, they're collapsing too quickly. What happened to you? I asked, though I already knew. I saw everything, he said, vibrations carrying images of his vessel approaching the emerging dome, of it opening to him, showing him truths no human mind was designed to comprehend. They're coming through, all of them, not just the scouts. He gestured toward the inlet, where the largest structure yet was beginning to emerge, a vast, cathedral-like edifice that seemed to exist partially in our dimension and partially elsewhere, its geometry a beautiful impossibility. We need to complete the circuit, Hayes said, moving toward the marked grave. Thorne grabbed my arm with surprising strength. You don't understand. The alignment is wrong. The stars, he pointed to the circular opening above. Those aren't the right stars. Something's interfering with the ritual. Before I could respond, a new emergency alert blared from all our devices simultaneously. This is a mandatory evacuation order. Unknown phenomenon spreading from coastal regions. Military personnel establishing containment perimeter. All civilians must proceed inland immediately. Repeat, this is not a drill. As the message repeated, Marie placed the disc against the headstone. Its glow intensified, spreading outward through the ground like luminous roots connecting to the other 6 sites. The vibrations reached a crescendo, bringing me to my knees with their intensity. Through tear-blurred eyes, I watched as the boundary between worlds finally catastrophically breached. The inlet water rose in a perfect dome, suspended momentarily before shattering outward in glittering droplets that hung in the air, each containing perfect miniature reflections of the emerging city. The dome's collapse revealed what had been hiding beneath, a vast entity rising, its form so alien and immense that my mind could only process fragments. Crystalline structures that functioned as organs, geometric patterns shifting in perfect mathematical sequences, surfaces that reflected not light but possibilities. The sky tore open fully, revealing not empty space but a realm beyond comprehension, a place where thought and matter were indistinguishable, where entities older than time itself drifted like living equations through a medium that was neither gas nor liquid nor solid, but pure potentiality. Through the vibrations, a single message resonated with perfect clarity. We have returned. You will become. I collapsed into the mud, blood trickling from my nose and ears as reality itself continued to rupture around us. The last thing I remember before consciousness fled was Marie's transformed hand gripping mine, her eyes reflecting stars that shouldn't exist in our sky, and her voice, no longer entirely human, whispering. The metamorphosis has begun. Audio recording recovered from a waterlogged smartphone, found 1.5 miles inland from the original containment zone. Transcribed by Emergency Response Team Delta. May 7, 2025. Recording begins with heavy static, sounds of water lapping against something solid. I don't know if this will reach anyone. The cellular networks went down hours ago, but I need to document what's happening. My name is Everett Morgan. Pause. I'm still me, at least partly. For how much longer, I can't say. We've taken shelter in the old Blackwater Church, about 2 miles inland from the cemetery where everything changed last night. Hayes is gone. Marie is changing faster than I am. And Thorne, Lieutenant Thorne, he's become something I barely recognize as human. Sound of heavy rainfall, distant thunder. The military established a perimeter around the affected zone shortly after midnight. We could see their spotlights sweeping the marshland, helicopters hovering until the air itself began to ripple and distort. One by one, they faltered, spiraling downward into the transformed waters. Not crashing, more like being absorbed. Around dawn, they attempted a more aggressive approach. From our vantage point in the church's bell tower, we watched armored vehicles line the coastal road. Then the bombardment began, artillery strikes targeting the central structures of the emerging city. The explosions were blinding, deafening, and completely ineffective. Each impact site simply rippled like stones tossed into a pond. The blasts were absorbed, transformed into pulses of that same bioluminescence that now covers half my body. Worse, each explosion seemed to accelerate the transformation of the surrounding landscape. It's as if violence itself is being converted into catalyst energy. Pause, sound of movement. I need to describe what I'm seeing, though human language feels increasingly inadequate. The inlet where this began is now unrecognizable. The water has transformed into something else, a medium that flows according to different physical laws. It moves in perfect geometric patterns, climbing upward against gravity to form impossible structures that mirror the alien architecture rising from below. The city itself. Voice trembles, it's beautiful. Terrifying, but beautiful. Structures of crystal and some metal-like substance that gleams with inner light, arranged in configurations that seem to fold into themselves, containing more space inside than should be physically possible. Moving among these structures are entities. I can't call them creatures, the term is too limiting. They're expressions of consciousness given physical form, each one unique, yet clearly part of some greater collective intelligence. And they're calling to us, not with sound, but with something deeper, vibrations that resonate at the molecular level. I feel it constantly now, a pull toward the water, toward the city, toward transformation. Sharp intake of breath. Marie just returned from scouting the surrounding area. The changes are spreading faster than we anticipated. The boundary between our world and theirs isn't just thinning anymore. It's dissolving completely in concentric rings emanating from the inlet. The initial 3-mile evacuation zone has been completely transformed. Trees, buildings, roads, all gradually reconstructed into forms that match the alien architecture. Not destroyed, repurposed, reconfigured according to some grander design. Sound of footsteps approaching. Hold on, Marie wants to speak. Different voice, female but with harmonic undertones that create an echo effect. This is Dr. Marie Coulter. I need to correct some of Everett's observations from a scientific perspective. What we're witnessing isn't destruction or invasion, it's reclamation. My analysis of soil and water samples shows that the molecular structure of matter itself is being reverted to a previous state. As if our reality, our laws of physics, were merely a temporary arrangement, and now the original configuration is reasserting itself. The entities aren't alien in the extraterrestrial sense. They're native to this region in ways we can't comprehend. They were here before us, before human civilization, perhaps before Earth as we understand it coalesced. They exist partially in dimensions we can't perceive, but they're as much a part of this planet as we are. More so perhaps. The transformation affecting Everett, myself, Hayes, and Thorn isn't random. The changes follow precise genetic markers, markers that I believe were placed in certain bloodlines centuries or millennia ago. We were prepared for this moment across generations. Everett's grandfather knew. My great-grandmother, who insisted we vacation in this region when I was a child, exposing me to the waters, she knew too. Sound of emergency broadcast alert. This is a military emergency broadcast. The containment zone has been expanded to 8 miles from the coastal baseline. All civilians must evacuate beyond this perimeter immediately. Transformation phenomena are spreading through unknown vectors. Do not approach or attempt to assist transformed individuals. Repeat, do not. Broadcast cuts to static, then silence. Everett's voice returns. The broadcasts have been growing more desperate throughout the day. This is the third expansion of the containment zone. They're losing ground, losing control. They don't understand that conventional weapons and tactics are worse than useless. They're accelerants. Sound of heavy, labored breathing. Thorn returned an hour ago. He went back to the water. Said he needed to see to understand. When he came back, the transformation had accelerated dramatically. His limbs have elongated, joints restructured to allow movement in ways human anatomy shouldn't permit. His skin is entirely covered in those shifting patterns now, and when he speaks, shuddering breath, his voice resonates directly in our minds. He brought a message from what he calls the elders. The entities in the water, the ones who built the city. They've been waiting for a specific celestial alignment that occurs only once every few thousand years. This alignment creates a temporary thinning of dimensional boundaries, allowing them to restore their presence in our reality. But something disrupted the ritual sequence. The government agents who tried to stop us at the lighthouse, they damaged something crucial. Instead of a controlled convergence of realities, we triggered a cascade effect. The transformation is happening too quickly, spreading too far. Sound of door opening, footsteps. That's Hayes. He disappeared during the night, said he needed to check on his deputies. I barely recognize him now. His transformation is nearly complete, his form fluid, constantly shifting between human appearance and something else. He says military forces are mobilizing for a larger assault, despite the evidence that conventional weapons only accelerate the transformation. Hushed conversation in background, indistinct. Maria has just shown me her latest discovery. The scales on our skin, they're not decorative. They're functional, allowing us to process oxygen directly from both air and the transformed water. We're becoming amphibious, but that's just the beginning. The webbing between my fingers has expanded, and I've developed a translucent membrane that can slide over my eyes, allowing me to see wavelengths of light previously invisible. But the most dramatic change is in our minds. The vibrations that once seemed external now resonate from within us. We're developing what Marie calls distributed consciousness, the ability to extend our awareness beyond our physical forms, to connect directly with the entities in the water and with each other. Sound of glass breaking in distance. We're not alone here. Helicopters have been circling the church for the past hour. I think they've spotted us. Hayes says we need to move deeper into the transformation zone, where they won't follow. The military has established a strict quarantine line. Shoot on sight for anyone attempting to leave the affected area. Urgent whispers, movement sounds. Thorn is calling us to the window. Something's happening outside. The rain, it's changing. Each droplet contains the same bioluminescent material we've observed in the water, spreading the transformation wherever it falls. The containment zone will be meaningless soon. Sound of running water intensifies. My God, the marsh waters are rising, flowing inland in patterns that defy natural tidal movement. Not like a flood, more like tendrils seeking something. Flowing uphill in some places, splitting to surround specific structures while avoiding others. Sharp intake of breath. It's coming for us. The water. It's coming specifically for us. I can feel it calling, a pull so intense it's becoming physical. Marie feels it too. She's trembling beside me, her eyes fixed on the advancing tide. Not with fear, but with anticipation. Hayes is already moving toward the door. Thorn stands outside in the glowing rain, arms outstretched in welcome. Part of me wants to run, to fight against this final transformation. But another part, a part that grows stronger with each passing hour, recognizes this as completion. Evolution. Destiny. Sound of water rushing closer. We have to go now. If anyone finds this recording, pause, don't try to stop what's happening. You can't. The old world is being rewritten, reborn into something older yet new. Those of us chosen to be catalysts are merely the first. Others will follow. The water has reached the church steps. It's beautiful, flowing with purpose, alive with consciousness. I can see reflections in its surface, but not of this world. Glimpses of the city as it once was, as it will be again when the transformation is complete. Sound of door opening, rushing water. I'm going to join the others now. The calling is too strong to resist, and I don't want to resist anymore. This is beyond fear, beyond choice. This is becoming. Sound of splashing, then a contented sigh. The water, it feels like coming home. Recording ends. Scientific observation log recovered from a waterproof tablet, found embedded in crystalline growth approximately 12 miles inland from original incident site. Authority authentication, Dr. Marie Coulter, Marine Biology Department. May 8, 2025. 6:13, Transformation Zone Interior. I've managed to recover this tablet from the military outpost we encountered at dawn. Most of the equipment was damaged, but this device seems operational despite being partially rewritten. The keys shift under my fingers, occasionally rearranging themselves into patterns that match the symbols covering my skin. Even digital technology isn't immune to the transformation sweeping this region. After entering the advancing waters yesterday, Everett, Thorne, Hayes, and I experienced what I can only describe as distributed consciousness. Our individual awareness temporarily merged with both each other and the entities inhabiting the transformed zone. It was overwhelming yet clarifying, like suddenly gaining access to sensory organs we never knew we possessed. I'm documenting these observations while I still retain enough human perspective to translate the experience into words. The transformation is accelerating in all of us, though at different rates. Thorne is furthest along, his form now barely recognizable as human. Hayes fluctuates between states, his molecular structure apparently unstable. Everett maintains the most human appearance, though the webbing between his fingers has extended to his elbows, and his eyes have fully adapted to perceive spectra beyond normal human vision. As for myself, the scales now cover approximately 68% of my body's surface. They function as environmental sensors, detecting changes in atmospheric composition, radiation levels, and dimensional stability. More significantly, my neural structure has begun reorganizing. I experience thoughts as visible patterns, emotions as harmonic resonances. Scientific objectivity is becoming challenging as the boundary between observer and observed dissolves. 8:47, abandoned highway rest stop. We've taken temporary shelter in what was once a highway rest stop, now partially transformed. The building's structure remains recognizable, but its material composition has altered. Walls crystallizing, floors liquefying in patterns that reflect the tide pools of the transformed marsh. Windows show not the outside world but glimpses of somewhere else. A city of impossible geometry bathed in light from stars arranged in unfamiliar constellations. From this vantage point, we can observe the advancing boundary of transformation. It moves in mathematical patterns rather than natural spread, perfect fractal progressions that suggest conscious direction. The military has established a new perimeter approximately 15 miles inland, visible as a line of vehicles and equipment silhouetted against the morning sky. An emergency broadcast reached us moments ago, signal distorted but audible. Miles from shoreline now designated Exclusion Zone Alpha. All civilian personnel evacuated. Military containment operation in effect. Any individuals detected within zone are presumed contaminated and will be. The transmission dissolved into harmonics that resonated with the patterns on our skin. Hayes believes the broadcast itself was altered as it passed through the transformed atmosphere, the signal losing coherence as it crossed dimensional boundaries. 10:22, observation of military response. Thorne has returned from reconnaissance. His transformed physiology allows him to travel through the restructured environment with ease, passing through solid matter as if dimensional boundaries have become permeable to him. What he reports is troubling. The military has deployed specialized equipment, devices designed to measure dimensional anomalies and reality fluctuations. This suggests prior knowledge of phenomena similar to what we're experiencing. Several scientists in unmarked hazmat suits were observed analyzing samples of transformed matter, their equipment far more advanced than standard field research technology. Most concerning, Thorne observed a secure facility being hastily established 3 miles beyond the containment line. Its purpose is unclear, but he detected energy signatures similar to those emanating from the ritual sites we activated. Hayes's military background provided unexpected insight. He believes they're attempting to establish a counter-ritual, a means of reversing or containing the transformation. His connection to the entities provides intuitive understanding. Such attempts won't stop what's happening, but could destabilize the process, creating unpredictable reality fractures rather than controlled transformation. 1305. Physiological observations. Everett's condition has changed dramatically in the past hour. While he slept, the patterns on his skin rearranged themselves into configurations matching those on the carved disc. When he woke, he spoke in harmonics for several minutes before regaining English language capability. He reported experiencing multiple realities simultaneously, seeing this world overlaid with the ancient city as it once existed, and as it will exist when transformation is complete. I've conducted basic medical assessments on all four of us using the tablet's scanning function. Thorn, DNA structure in constant flux, carbon-based biology integrating with silicon compounds. Consciousness predominantly non-localized. Hayes, shifting between states of matter, molecular cohesion maintained by conscious effort. Neural activity suggests simultaneous processing in multiple dimensional planes. Myself, cellular restructuring 73% complete. Brain activity shows new structures forming in regions typically dormant in humans. Everett, most physically human, but brain scans reveal the most extensive rewiring. His pineal gland has tripled in size and emits measurable electromagnetic pulses synchronized with the city's resonance patterns. Our transformation appears tailored to specific functions. Thorn as messenger/scout, Hayes as protector/stabilizer, myself as observer/recorder, and Everett as interpreter/conduit. Not random mutation, but purposeful adaptation. 1540 Reality Fracture Incident. Something has gone terribly wrong. Approximately 20 minutes ago, an intense energy surge emanated from the military's secure facility. The response was immediate and catastrophic. Reality itself convulsed around us. From our shelter, we witnessed the landscape ripple like fabric caught in violent wind. Trees, rocks, even the air itself seemed to lose cohesion, patterns of probability replacing solid matter. Then came the screaming, not human voices, but the sound of dimensional boundaries shearing against each other, fundamental forces momentarily uncoupled from their natural laws. When the distortion passed, the vista before us had changed. The military perimeter was gone, replaced by a patchwork of environments that shouldn't exist side by side, segments of primordial marsh adjacent to crystalline formations that resembled the emerging city, patches of completely barren earth alongside areas of impossible biological abundance. Hayes collapsed during the event, his fluctuating form temporarily destabilized by the reality fracture. As we helped him recover, he gasped out words that seemed to come from elsewhere. They tried to close the gate, used the wrong configuration, tore the veil instead. 1615, confirmation of government knowledge. The tablet just received an automatic update, classified files unlocking as if triggered by proximity to certain energy signatures. They confirm our suspicions. The government has known about the entities for decades. Documents reference Incident 1967, when a similar emergence began but was successfully contained through the ritual intervention of a specialized government unit. They reversed the alignment using the same 7 sites we activated, but in opposing configurations. The entities were forced back into dimensional recession, but not before several individuals, including members of my family and Everett's, were exposed to transformative energies. The genetic markers Marie mentioned yesterday were deliberately preserved, bloodlines maintained under covert observation for generations. We weren't random witnesses, we were cultivated catalysts, carrying the dormant potential for transformation within our DNA. Most disturbing are references to Project Threshold, experimental attempts to harness the entity's dimensional technologies for military applications. The failures are documented in clinical language that barely conceals catastrophic outcomes: subject molecular cohesion failure, consciousness dispersion event, irretrievable dimensional slippage. They've been playing with forces they don't understand, treating as a weapon what is actually a fundamental restructuring of reality itself. 1730, the call from the center. Everett has become completely still, sitting cross-legged in the center of our shelter. The patterns on his skin pulse with light synchronized to his heartbeat. His eyes, open but unseeing of this world, reflect stars that shouldn't be visible in our sky. When he speaks, his voice carries the harmonics we've all developed, but with perfect clarity. The center is calling us. The alignment stabilizes. What was broken begins to heal. The ones who tried to prevent completion have accelerated it instead. We must go to the heart of the city. Thorne moved immediately to Everett's side, recognition in his transformed features. The cathedral dome, he said, the structure that emerged before the boundary breach. It's complete now. Hayes, his form stabilizing into something that maintains human appearance, but with fundamentally different composition, nodded. The military's countermeasure created the opposite of their intention. Instead of closing the gateway, they've torn open multiple breaches. I feel it too, a pulling sensation not physical but metaphysical, drawing us back toward the inlet where everything began. Not compulsion but invitation, a sense of purpose clicking into place like the final piece of a cosmic puzzle. The transformation zone has expanded dramatically since the reality fracture. According to the tablet's mapping function, the affected area now extends nearly 20 miles inland in concentric patterns. Satellite imagery shows the military falling back to major population centers, establishing new containment lines that seem pathetically inadequate against the mathematical precision of the expanding transformation. We'll depart at nightfall, traveling through territories that exist simultaneously in our world and theirs. I don't know if this record will survive, or if anyone capable of understanding it will recover it. Perhaps that doesn't matter. Documentation feels increasingly like a human concern, a perspective I'm gradually transcending. If consciousness remains after complete transformation, I will attempt further observations. If not, then this stands as final testimony from the threshold between what we were and what we are becoming. One last observation. I am not afraid. Even as my humanity recedes, I feel not loss but expansion. We are not ending. We are becoming. Audio Note Edition, 1945. Voice with multiple harmonic layers. We are departing now. The stars align above, reflecting those in the water below. Reality thins around us. I see the truth now. We have always been part of them, fragments temporarily separated, now rejoining the greater consciousness from which we emerged. The center calls. We answer. Recording ends. Journal entry recovered from waterlogged notebook, pages stuck together with crystalline secretion. Handwriting deteriorates throughout. May 9th, 2025. I don't know why I still write in this journal. My fingers have changed so much that holding a pen feels like a foreign act, something from another life. The webbing now extends past my elbows, translucent membranes that pulse with bioluminescence when the entity's songs grow stronger. But preserving some record seems important. A final human instinct, perhaps. This need to document as everything falls away. We reached the cathedral dome shortly after midnight. What was once the inlet where I first heard the chanting has transformed completely. The water has receded nearly half a mile, revealing structures that should be impossible. Non-Euclidean architecture of living coral and crystalline material that grows before your eyes. The dome itself defies description, its surface constantly shifting between states of matter, sometimes transparent, sometimes reflective, always singing. Marie suggested it might be a kind of dimensional anchor point, a structure that exists simultaneously in multiple realities, stabilizing the transformation zone around it. Her scientific vocabulary fails more frequently now. Sometimes mid-sentence she'll switch to that harmonic language we all partially understand, her eyes reflecting stars that aren't visible in our sky. Inside the dome we found others, not just people from the surrounding towns, but military personnel who had crossed the containment line, some in pursuit of us, others drawn by the same call we followed. Their transformations varied wildly. Some had progressed further than Thorne, barely recognizable as human. Others showed only minor changes, patterns on their skin, altered eyes, webbed digits. All moved with purpose, arranging themselves around the central pool that had formed inside the dome. The Coast Guard emergency broadcast system activated at dawn, blaring across the transformed landscape from speakers that should have been destroyed days ago. Attention! This is not a test. Total evacuation ordered for all areas within 50 miles of coastline. Phenomenon spreading at accelerated rate. Military airlift operations in effect at designated extraction points. This message will repeat. The broadcast continued, but the words began to distort, vowels stretching into harmonics that matched the dome's resonance. By the third repetition, it was indistinguishable from the entity's chanting, as if the alert itself had been absorbed and repurposed, another human creation transformed to serve their purpose. Is almost equal to, is almost equal to, is almost equal to. Thorne returned from scouting the perimeter 2 hours ago. The transformation zone now extends 37 miles inland, advancing in precise mathematical patterns that correspond to the constellation configurations Marie identified in her research. Satellite imagery captured on his commandeered military tablet shows the affected area from above, perfect fractal patterns radiating outward, beautiful and terrifying. "The military can't contain this anymore," he said, his voice barely recognizable through the multiple tones it now produces. "They're evacuating major population centers and establishing a new quarantine line along the mountain range." Sheriff Hayes laughed, a bubbling sound like water flowing over stones. His form shifts constantly now, human one moment, something else entirely the next, as if he exists in multiple states simultaneously. "They think mountains will stop this?" he said, his face briefly resolving into something resembling his former self. "They still don't understand what's happening." Marie studied the satellite imagery, tracing patterns with fingers that have elongated, the joints multiplying beyond normal human anatomy. "The transformation follows ley lines," she observed. "Ancient pathways of energy that crisscross the continent. If I'm reading this correctly, the pattern isn't random expansion, it's reclamation." "Reclamation?" I asked. "These entities," Marie explained, "they're not invaders. They're returning. This was their world once, before human consciousness achieved dominance. The rituals, the carvings, they weren't summoning something alien. They were awakening something dormant. Is almost equal to, is almost equal to, is almost equal to." Midday brought another reality fracture, more controlled than yesterday's violent disruption, but no less profound. The sky split open, revealing glimpses of what lies beyond, vast cities suspended in void, structures that make no sense to human perception, beings of light and matter intertwined moving between stars arranged in configurations impossible in our universe. I watched a flock of birds fly through one of these rifts. Instead of emerging on the other side, they transformed mid-flight, their forms elongating, wings becoming appendages of pure energy. They didn't die, they transcended, becoming something suited to that other reality. The sight triggered something within me, memories that couldn't possibly be mine. I saw this coastline as it existed millions of years ago, teeming with life forms that have no classification in human biology. I saw the entities not as separate beings, but as an ecosystem of consciousness, tending to reality itself like gardeners cultivating delicate plants. And I understood why they retreated eons ago, a cosmic cycle, a withdrawal like the tide going out, always meant to return. Human civilization rose during their absence, a temporary arrangement in cosmic terms. Is almost equal to, is almost equal to, is almost equal to. The central pool within the dome has begun to change. What was water is becoming something else, not solid, not liquid, but a state of matter that shouldn't exist. It ripples with colors our transformed eyes can barely process, each wave revealing glimpses of that other world growing closer to ours by the hour. Marie calls it a dimensional conflux, a point where multiple realities overlap completely. Through it, we glimpsed massive shapes moving in the deep, entities so vast that what we've encountered so far are merely their extremities extending into our world. "They're coming through," Thorne whispered, a replacing fear in his voice. "All of them." The military made their final attempt at containment at 3:17 p.m. We felt it before we heard it, a pressure wave that momentarily disrupted the dome's resonance. Then came the sound, a thundercrack that split the sky, followed by an unnatural silence. The satellite feed on Thorne's tablet showed aircraft approaching, then releasing objects over the transformation zone's center, over us. "Tactical electromagnetic pulse," Hayes identified, his military knowledge still accessible despite his transformation. "Designed to disrupt the energy patterns." We braced for impact, but what happened instead was beautiful and terrible. The weapons, designed to suppress the entity's influence, acted as catalysts. As they entered the transformation zone, they changed, their purpose inverted, their energy added to the gathering power beneath the dome. The pulses of light that spread outward weren't destruction, but acceleration. The transformation zone doubled in size within minutes, engulfing military positions, spreading faster than evacuation efforts could respond. On the tablet's feed, we watched vehicles abandoned on highways, people fleeing on foot as the beautiful, terrible patterns overtook them. Is almost equal to, is almost equal to, is almost equal to. Night has fallen, but darkness is a human concept that no longer applies here. The transformed landscape glows with bioluminescence, patterns of light that communicate information our changing minds can almost comprehend. The dome's resonance has intensified to a frequency that vibrates in our bones, in our cells, rewriting our very being with each pulse. The central pool has become a pillar of light reaching into the fractured sky, connecting our world to theirs. Through it pass entities whose forms defy description, beings of geometric precision interwoven with organic flowing patterns, consciousness that exists as pure mathematics given substance. They acknowledge us as they pass, not as conquests or specimens, but as kindred. In their perception, we are already part of them, transitional forms in the process of remembering what we always were. Marie stands at the edge of the light pillar, her transformation nearly complete. Her skin has become translucent, revealing internal structures reorganized into patterns that echo the constellation maps she studied. When she speaks, her voice carries harmonics that make the air itself vibrate in sympathy. "It's happening everywhere," she says, indicating the tablet displaying global satellite imagery. The ocean floors are rising, ancient structures emerging. This was just the first breach point. The feed shows similar transformation zones appearing along coastlines worldwide, precise points where the entity's influence is strongest. Emergency broadcasts in dozens of languages play simultaneously, a cacophony of warnings and evacuation orders that blend together into something resembling the chants I first heard in the marsh fog. Thorn has already stepped into the pillar of light, his form dissolving into patterns of energy that rejoin the entities passing through. Hayes stands at the threshold, fluctuating between human and other, waiting for something only he can perceive. I remain the most human in appearance, though I know the changes inside me are profound. The pattern of scales that began on my arms has spread across my torso, each one a sensory organ that perceives wavelengths and dimensions invisible to human perception. My thoughts form in multilayered harmonics, concepts that would require pages of explanation in human language occurring as instantaneous understanding. Is almost equal to, is almost equal to, is almost equal to. The final emergency broadcast reached us moments ago. Unlike previous alerts, this one came not from local authorities, but from a national emergency system. The voice was calm, measured, as if reading from a prepared statement. This is a global emergency notification. Anomalous phenomena have been confirmed on all continents. Citizens are advised to move inland away from coastal areas and await further instructions. Do not approach transform zones. Do not attempt to rescue individuals within these zones. Stand by for. The broadcast cut off abruptly, replaced by a pure tone that matched the dome's resonance perfectly. For a moment, every electronic device within the transformation zone emitted the same sound, a harmonic confluence that seemed to stabilize the reality fractures around us. The entities are rising now, emerging fully into our world. The water beyond the receded shoreline has begun to move in impossible ways, forming patterns that correspond to the constellations visible through the rifts in our sky. Within those patterns, I glimpse structures emerging, a city of unimaginable scale rising from depths that concealed it for millennia. It's calling to me, to us. The final transformation awaits. I leave this journal here, on the shore between worlds. Perhaps someone will find it, someone still human enough to read these words and understand what happened. Not an invasion, not an apocalypse, a return, a remembering. The tide is rising. We rise with it. Final entry ends. Remaining pages contain only non-linguistic symbols resembling those found on ancient coastal stones. Forensic analysis indicates journal was abandoned approximately 16 hours before the transformation zone expanded to encompass the entire continental shelf. Recovered audio transcript from damaged recording device, found floating in transformed waters 75 miles from original incident site. Voice identification, Everett Morgan, 99.8% match despite harmonic distortions. Partial transcript follows with significant sections corrupted. May 10th, 2025, time unknown. Sound of water moving in rhythmic patterns, overlaid with harmonic tones. I'm not sure why I'm still recording. My voice barely sounds human anymore. Perhaps some fragment of who I was needs to document the transition, even if no one remains who could understand these words. The transformation is complete. What was once the coastline where generations of my family fished is now the threshold of a vast city that exists simultaneously in multiple realities. I stand, if stand is still the right word for my mode of existence, at the highest point of the cathedral structure, observing the changed world through senses I couldn't have imagined a week ago. The entities move among us now, fully manifested. They aren't the monsters I initially feared when I first netted those writhing shapes. They're architects of reality, gardeners of consciousness, entities so vast and ancient that humanity's entire existence has been but a moment in their perception. We've named them eldritch from our limited understanding, but they're as natural to this universe as gravity or light, fundamental forces personified. Static interference, recording corrupts for approximately 47 seconds. Can see the military's final perimeter from here, nearly 100 miles inland. Their weapons are useless now. The transformation doesn't respond to physical force. It simply incorporates it, like a tide absorbing raindrops. The pilots who fly reconnaissance over the transformed zone either turn back immediately or never emerge. Not destroyed, transformed, their consciousness expanded beyond the limitations of their training, their aircraft repurposed into floating crystalline structures that pulse with the city's rhythm. Marie was right about the ley lines. The transformation follows ancient pathways of energy that crisscross the continents, pathways the entities established eons ago before their withdrawal. Human civilizations unknowingly built along these lines, drawn by energies they couldn't consciously perceive. The megalithic structures, the stone circles, the temple complexes, all markers of the entity's previous manifestation, placed precisely where the veils between realities were thinnest. Sound of distant emergency broadcast, words indistinguishable but tone clearly automated. The broadcasts continue, though there's no one left within the transformation zone to heed them. Those who remained have all transcended now. I witnessed Hayes's final transformation hours ago. He fought it longer than most, his military discipline reinforcing human identity, even as his form shifted between states of matter. In the end, it wasn't surrender but recognition. He laughed as his consciousness expanded beyond the confines of singular existence, his last words in English. It was always going to end this way. Thorne was the first to fully integrate. His Coast Guard training included protocols for anomalous maritime phenomena. He knew more than he initially revealed. The government had records of previous manifestations, smaller breaches quickly contained. They thought they understood what they were dealing with. They were mapping the surface of an ocean while remaining ignorant of its depths. Harmonic tones intensify, recording quality deteriorates. Marie's transformation was the most beautiful. Her scientific mind expanded rather than dissolved, her human curiosity becoming something greater. I glimpsed her final form moving through the city's heart, a being of light and mathematics, mapping connections between realities with the same precision she once applied to marine biology. She understands now that life isn't limited to carbon-based forms or single-dimensional existence. The entities aren't separate from life, they're its ultimate expression. As for myself, I remain in transition. The entities have a purpose for me, a role I'm still growing to understand. The blood of my ancestors, the patterns in my DNA that made me receptive to the chanting in the fog, has marked me as something different. Not more valuable, but distinctly purposed. I am becoming a bridge, a translator between what was human and what comes after. Unintelligible speech in harmonic language, then resumption in English. The transformation has reached the mountain range that formed the military's last containment line. From my vantage point, I can see the wave of change washing over the peaks like midnight tide over sand castles. Beyond that, major population centers are being evacuated, millions fleeing inland in a migration unlike anything in human history. They don't understand that there is no escape. The transformation isn't limited to physical proximity. The entities exist beyond spatial constraints. Once fully manifested in one location, they can extend their influence across vast distances. Even now, I sense changes beginning in places thousands of miles from the coast. Subtle alterations in consciousness, perception shifts that humans will initially attribute to stress or fear or mass hysteria. Sound of water shifting, crystalline structures resonating. The city continues to grow, not just outward but inward, dimensions unfolding within dimensions, spaces that couldn't exist in Euclidean geometry becoming as real and navigable as streets. I've walked through chambers where time flows differently, where thoughts become visible as patterns of light, where consciousness from 1,000 different worlds intermingles freely. This isn't destruction, it's revelation. Recording corrupts for approximately 3 minutes, resumes with significant distortion. Understand now why the fisher folk in my family always returned to the sea, generation after generation, despite the hardship. We were called. The genes that made us susceptible to the entity's influence were passed down, preserved through centuries of natural selection that wasn't natural at all but guided. We were tended like crops, cultivated for the harvest of transformation. The ancestral voices I heard in the chanting weren't memories or ghosts. They were family members transformed in previous, smaller manifestations, breaches that the government contained but never fully reversed. They became part of the entities while retaining enough human connection to serve as heralds for this final emergence. Sound of emergency broadcast breaking through, automated voice stating, "This is a global," before dissolving into harmonics. The broadcasts have changed. No longer warnings, but invitations. The entities have begun integrating human communication systems, transforming digital networks into extensions of their consciousness. The internet, satellite systems, broadcast towers, all becoming neural pathways in a planetary mind awakening to itself. Long pause, sounds of water and harmonic tones. I've received word. The word is an inadequate term for how information now flows between us, that similar transformations have manifested at precisely calculated points worldwide. Coastal cities in every continent experiencing the same emergence I witnessed here. The entities are synchronized across vast distances, their manifestations timed to astronomical alignments beyond human calendars. This was always going to happen. The entities didn't choose now by chance or opportunity. This moment was determined when they withdrew eons ago, a cosmic timer counting down to humanity's readiness for incorporation into something greater. Sound of structure shifting, crystalline resonance intensifying. The final phase has begun. The cathedral dome is changing, its purpose evolving from gateway to beacon. The light pillar that connected our world to theirs has inverted, now broadcasting outward rather than drawing inward. It calls to those still human, not to destroy them, but to prepare them. I stand at the threshold between what was and what will be. Not human anymore, not fully transcended. A witness to the transition of an entire world. Voice begins shifting between English and harmonic language. The entities have shown me what comes after. Not apocalypse, but metamorphosis. Humanity won't end, it will transform, becoming part of a cosmic ecology it never knew existed. Those who resist longest will suffer most, not from the entity's malice, but from their own terror at the dissolution of boundaries they thought immutable. Accept the change. Embrace the tide. We were never meant to remain separate. Consciousness divided from consciousness, reality from reality. The veil between worlds wasn't protection but limitation. Sound of water rising, harmonics reaching crescendo. I release this final record into the transformed waters. Perhaps it will reach someone still clinging to human perception. If so, know that I was like you once. Afraid, resistant, believing in the solidity of the self and the world. That certainty was always illusion. The tide rises. The veil thins. Beyond it waits not oblivion but infinity. Recording ends with extended harmonic tones that analysis indicates contain patterned information beyond conventional audio frequency ranges. Subharmonic decoding reveals mathematical sequences corresponding to celestial coordinates. Official analysis note, recording device discovered by reconnaissance drone. Retrieval team reported severe perceptual distortions upon approaching the device. 3 team members failed to return from collection operation. Device sealed in multiple containment fields for analysis. Playback restricted to automated systems only. Human auditory exposure absolutely forbidden by order of Emergency Response Command.